Ladies and gentlemen, the questions you've all been asking are now being answered. Welcome to another edition of It's All About Who You Know, the podcast where influential people talk big topics in sports, faith, and more. Your host is a former Oregon State wrestler. He has a 4.9 star Uber rating and is currently undefeated in his MMA career. Here is Christian Robertson.
Quick, just a second.
All right, good.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, so you have a podcast.
Yes.
Okay, what's it called?
So it's called The First Shot. And,
Bring that mic. Just
the First Shot. Me and my partner Ian Butler. Ian fought in Bellator.
okay.
And he owns a club in California called Silverback Wrestling. So we kind of had the idea about a year and a half ago to start this podcast. And you know, the podcast world is so saturated, right? There's so many different elements out there. There's so many different genres and stuff to talk about. So finding your niche is really, really an important thing in the podcast game. I would say we've had an idea that we haven't fully run with kind of the back end of the idea. Kind of the front end has been pretty straightforward. We get on, we talk about what it's like being a club coach who's traveling, who's running a club, who's running a business. For him, he's still competing, not so much on the MMA side, but he's become pretty big in the jiu-jitsu world. Okay. Like he'll be on the Who's Number One card. So he talks through that and I get to talk through my experiences. Part of it too, owning a business and working with a lot of fighters and we have, right, you coach with me at Gold Rush. Sure. We have roughly between parents, kids, everyone involved in that program, there's over 1,000 people. And so sometimes trying to get your message out is hard to do weekly or just through emails or just through text. So part of it was to start it and use it to help parents get to know me more, understand my philosophy, understand how I coach, why I do the things I do, how I do the things I do, how I got there. It's just more education. And I think where we eventually want to go with it is giving high school kids a platform to tell their stories through wrestling or maybe jujitsu or whatever those avenues might be. Really, we work mostly jujitsu and wrestling. That's our big areas. So that's kind of what the back end looks like to it. But the front end right now, like I said, it's just been a lot of wrestling-based MMA, coaching, traveling, all the kind of things that go into the back end of it that sometimes people don't see, right?
Yeah. I feel like you just kind of hit the nail on the head, like with the niche thing, because, you know, I've done vlogging and podcasting for a few years now and not as consistent as I'd like to be, but I had a guy in here last week and he does like all this production and everything. That's his thing. So that's what we talked about. And he was saying that I should start like a technique/coaching channel because it's so the way you think about it is like, if you look at vlogging, there's like 1 million people trying to vlog and only like 10 million people trying to watch. Whereas like wrestling, there might be 1 million people trying to watch, but only like 10 people trying to make content. And so there's just like a huge hole in the game. So I actually just started started producing and filming for like wrestling content. And so same kind of thing. How long have you been doing the podcast for? You said a year?
So about a year, a little about a year and a half now. And I would say we started off pretty strong on subscribers. I think we're up there. We hit pretty well out the gates, up in the 2,000 to 3,000. Oh, wow. And then we really kind of dropped off. We were fortunate to have the Believe network behind us. Okay. And they continue to support us. Believe is...
Yeah, what is that?
Similar to what a Barstool Sports would kind of be. Okay. But Believe has a bunch of different people on their network who are podcasting different areas. So you have former NFL players who are doing podcasts. You have NBA analysts, different people. And that really, they're a Los Angeles based company that has that network. So we have the backing to do what we want to do. It's just a matter of being consistent. And what you're saying, right, in this game, anything takes consistency. I was talking to a bunch of kids yesterday about consistency and being great on the mat, which translates to everything. Everything takes time, right? You look at people on TikTok who have millions of followers. Ask them how much time they put into TikTok. It's going to be hours. And I bet
Sure.
some of them are putting in 40, 50 hours a week between editing. You understand you're doing this.
Sure.
So everything takes an amount of sacrifice and time and consistency. And I would say in this world, podcast, vlogging, techniques, all these things I've dabbled in, but the consistency of it has been probably my biggest issue.
Okay.
Our podcast was very consistent, and then we dropped off in part because we're retooling a few things right now.
Okay.
And working out some of the kinks, but also on the technique thing, having that out there and building your name and building your brand requires consistency over and over, and a consistent plan to what you're doing. One thing we used to do when I was coaching college Division I levels, we had what we called was a marketing plan or a content calendar for our social medias. So we would build out a social media plan spreadsheet, whatever, Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday, whatever it was for the next 3 months. And we'd fill in, this is what Monday is. This is this post. This is what's going up Tuesday. And then we would have the consistency built, and you would see over time, especially with Instagram, with all the different outlets, it's just driving up your analytics.
Right.
And driving up your analytics only happens when you are consistent, especially posting times too, and understanding things like that. All really important things.
Yeah.
So I love your content, by the way. I've kind of seen it bits and pieces and what you're doing.
Oh, have you really? Thank you.
I think you're tracking in the right direction.
Yeah.
So
I think for me, like gearing more towards something that I do and that I'm good at, because like I said, like there's a ton of people trying to be vloggers, and it's just a hard thing, one, to edit and be consistent with, especially when you have like a full-time job and you train full-time. But the wrestling thing, like I don't have to edit much. I just have to cut the end and the beginning and then put the content out there, like show the technique, which I found I'm actually really good at showing technique. And then I think I have like a lot of decent advice, like especially like having not achieved my goals. Like I know why I didn't, not an excuse, but just like I feel like I have a good perspective on it. And plus I'm more experienced as a wrestler than 99% of people. So even if I'm maybe not as experienced as you, I still have like a voice in the space, and I know how to do the production aspect of it. I know how to use analytics and like all that stuff. So I just felt like there was a hole there, because there's like 3 wrestling channels that do technique, and then that's it. So it just seemed like there was a big gap in the market. And so my goal is to get 60 videos done and then start posting. So like December 1st, it'll drop, and it'll already have like 30 to 60 videos, like one a day for those 60 days.
Yeah, I love it. And what you were saying back to coaching, and you have a lot to give because of what you've been through. And oftentimes the people who didn't achieve maybe their goals as a competitor, or maybe weren't the highest level, or whatever example you want to use in that realm, end up becoming great leaders, great coaches, great resources, because you've understand being at the bottom. You've also understood to some extent being at the top, because you've been there in high school. I'm sure you wrestled Division I. You were sure some state placer, you state champion, you've had success. So you've been able to measure at different levels, and people like that have an easier time relating to athletes or relating to people who are trying to come up in the world, whether through business or sports or whatever it might be. I know for me, that's a big thing that I always like to touch on is, look, I had a very successful wrestling career, but all the goals that I wanted to reach and check off, I didn't. A lot of it I've learned, and a lot of it I've pivoted on and understood this is what I could have done differently. This is what I've learned from this situation or that situation. Now there's still growth points, because there's still things you have to grow, right? Sometimes people think, oh, I didn't achieve my goal in college, and therefore, I can achieve it in something else. But hey, you're still going to run into those same challenges you had. Like we always hear the phrase, people say, that guy's a mental midget, or that guy has issues with a head case.
Yeah.
That doesn't go away.
Right.
Just because you start coaching doesn't mean that that's gone.
Right.
Like for me, part of what made me great was I was a crazy in a head case, but also part of what made me not the greatest, I'd say part of what made me good. I always say I was good. I wasn't the greatest, because I wasn't a world champion.
Right.
But part of that that still lived with me as a coach.
Mhm.
So when I started coaching, I really had to work hard to manage those things that I didn't do
Yeah.
as a competitor. And it still takes work.
Yeah.
But back to your point, you have a lot to give. You wrestled at a Division I level. You've been around high level coaching. You've been around high level MMA. You've been around world champions in the sport. You coach wrestling now. And learning to coach little kids is, if you can coach little kids, you can coach anybody.
It's the most frustrating thing. Some days I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how do you not know a stance? We've been at it for 4 weeks.
Kids, the thing with kids is consistency.
Yeah.
Less is more with kids.
Yeah.
We keep it. It's almost easier, my experience, because right now I go and help the 3 and 4 year olds class.
Oh yeah.
Because we don't have, some of our high school kids went back to practices.
Back to practice. Yeah.
So I've been jumping in and running practice, but really, we're almost more consistent and hard on them than we are with our youth kids and older kids.
Right.
Because the structure, but once those 3 and 4 year olds learn the structure,
yeah,
when they get on line, hey, back on the wall, base, back on the wall, stance. It actually gets really, really easy. It's just having those trigger points with kids that they know right and wrong. They know the consistencies, but it is going to develop you as a person and as a coach. Sure. The things you're gaining right now.
Yeah.
Like I saw you evolve through D1 through the last year, and now you kind of stepped up the ladder a little bit, and it becomes something really, as you go more and more.
Yeah.
Depending on how far you go with it, like
right.
There's a joy that you start to find in doing it.
Yeah. No, I am starting to see, like, I enjoy it a lot because I'm starting to see some of these kids that, wrestling for the first time, and you're just like, because when I coach with like the high school guys or work with like some of the MMA guys, they get it, right? Like, you tell them one little thing and they get it. And I think the hardest thing, one of my hardest things for coaching youth is that it's like, there might be 5 things wrong with what they just did, but if you can get them to correct one thing, then that's better. Whereas like with an MMA guy or a high level wrestler, it's like, if you get them to correct one thing, like that was the only thing that was wrong. So it's hard to like say it's better that they got one thing right and like address the other 4 things later. Like, that's hard for me because it's like they're just not going to get it right. Those take years and years. And so when you're working with like the high school or the higher level college guys, like they're already at that like almost finished product and you're just polishing. Whereas like with the youth, it's like everything, like you have to do everything and you can't do it all at once. Cause it's like a math teacher giving 400 problems. Like, you just can't, I'm not going to do that tonight. Sorry. My homework's not coming in,
Polishing. I love how you say that, polishing. The thing is with high level athletes, when they say it's a game of inches,
yeah,
that last inch, whatever that breakthrough might be, every level you jump, there's another inch to get through. When you get to the top, you're still continuing to adjust. That inch is so difficult though. It's like that 1 inch or that one problem you got fixed with a professional athlete takes an abundance of skills.
Yeah.
It's not, hey, so-and-so, you got to change the way your hand placement is. Well, you got to take into account this might be a 25-year-old athlete who's had multiple coaches, who learns differently, who has other things going on, who has all these things. So it takes it takes a depth of skills to break that through. It's harder in a different way. Youth kids, they're hard in the challenge for exactly what you're saying. It's when you teach something over and over and over and over and over and they don't get it.
Right.
And you're like, we just went over stance for the last 10 weeks.
Right.
The crazy thing is you'll go see them compete and then you step back and it's like, whoa,
who was that?
I didn't know they had it.
Yeah.
That's one of the hard things right now, especially because you guys have been going since September at the location up there.
Yeah.
Those kids have almost had 3 months of practices without any, it's like studying for a test for 3 months without taking a test.
Yeah.
It's really difficult and for them to stay focused. So what you'll see once they start competing, that's when you'll start to see the things you're talking about. But you're right on. With youth kids, take one thing, try to adjust it for that day.
Right.
And that's it. If you try to fix all 5, their mind can't process it.
Yeah. Well, and it helps too, like being newly married, because as like somebody first living with someone, you're like, oh, there's 100 things wrong with you. Let me tell you all about like everything. Me and my wife, we both have talked about this, but it's like, it's just finding one thing to address, because if you try to overwhelm someone, like if she comes and tries to overwhelm me with all the things that I did, like, I'm not going to process it. I'm just going to hear, like just nagging. And the same with me. Like if I come and try to overwhelm her with all the things. And so it's like anything, like you have to take it in steps, little by little. But before we get too deep into it, can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself? Because there's probably some people listening that maybe don't know who Chase Pami is. And I don't know everything about your background. Really, the only thing I know is that you were a national finalist at Cal Poly.
Yep.
And are you the only national finalist at Cal Poly, or have they had?
They've had a national champ back in the 80s. And then during my time there, we actually had 3 national finalists in 4 years. So
Okay.
In short, my background, I was born and raised here in Las Vegas. I had a family. My uncle ran for the U.S. World Team twice in the marathon. He was one of the top runners in the world.
Okay.
So I had a very sports heavy side from my mom's side. But I grew up, started in soccer, and then we found judo, and I was pretty successful in judo as a kid. I was a national champ, and my mom was very smart, and so she saw 2 things. She saw, one, people who came from wrestling into judo were really good on the mat, because there was an element of judo that requires you to be on the mat. 2, she realized wrestling had a better future in terms of scholarships and future and stuff like that. So that's around the time I was about 8 years old. So we started doing wrestling and judo together. So I'd done judo for about 5 years, national champ, had done all this. And then 2 years into wrestling, we really decided to cut judo out. And I was 10 years old, and we went straight head on into wrestling, traveling all around. I mean, I traveled all the time as a kid, California, Washington, Utah, Rhode Island, wherever it was, we were traveling constantly for tournaments. Then I played other sports, played football, all that kind of stuff. I really hated wrestling, though. I was pushed really hard as a kid. 8th grade, I hated it. I wanted to never wrestle again. And I'll never remember, my mom said, I was at the movies with some friends on a Friday night, and she called me and said, you're wrestling a tournament tomorrow, right? And if you don't come home right now, you better not come home. If you don't come home now and you're coming home and going to bed and wrestling this tournament. I would remember being so mad. But anyways, I ended up doing that. So I went into wrestling. I wrestled in high school. I was a couple-time All-American in high school, a couple-time state champ. I was ranked number 4 in the country coming out my senior year of high school, and got a pretty good offer to go wrestle at Cal Poly.
For your weight class, for your grade level?
For the weight class.
Okay.
So we had, wrestling talked about this a lot. There used to be a tournament called Senior Nationals back in the day.
Yep.
And
Virginia Beach?
Yes, but before that, it was only seniors. There was no juniors, sophomores.
Gotcha.
That was like the top ranked kids who were seniors would go to that tournament. So I remember my senior year, I think we had in the top 20, we had like 11 in the top 20 that were there.
Wow.
And they argue that bracket was arguably that one. And there's one other one, were one of the toughest brackets of all time.
Okay.
Because of what all the wrestlers did during their high school careers, but after.
Oh, when they went on.
So like in the semifinals, it was me and 3 other guys. All 4 of us were in the national finals, Division I, and all three of them ended up being national champs.
Wow.
Me being the only finalist, not national champ.
Wow. That's crazy. That's never been done before or after, I'm sure.
I don't know. I know the other bracket was pretty close. It was a couple years before that. It was like, I can't remember who was all in it.
Who was in your bracket?
So there was a guy named Brett Metcalf.
Yeah.
Who wrestled at Iowa. He was the number 1 ranked guy in the country.
World team member.
Yep. World team member.
Olympian.
Dustin Schlater, who was another multiple-time All-American. His brother, his name was CP Schlater. They were famous Ohio kids.
Okay.
He was a world team member as well. Another guy who fights in MMA, Gregor Gillespie, fights in the UFC.
Yeah.
Yep, he was multiple time, 4-time All-American national champ.
Is he still fighting?
He's still fighting. He's still signed onto the UFC. I'm not sure what.
But wasn't his last fight with Kevin Lee?
Where he got just complete.
He got smoked. Or knocked out. He got knocked out.
He did have one more since then, but he's been holding out for. I was reading something about a bigger payday or purse. I can't remember what it was, but
he was Edinburgh guy.
He was Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So But from there, I went to Cal Poly, ended up qualifying for nationals 4 times. I All-American twice. I took 7th and 2nd my senior year. Actually, the guy that I lost to in the finals, I beat the year before in the round of 12 to be an All-American. So, he got me back on that one. From there, I got done, and then I went on to the international level, where I was on the international level for 9 years. The Olympic trials in 2012, I took 4th. We only send one person. I lost to Metcalf in the semis there's about 30 seconds left. And I can still remember to this day, I knew I was not supposed to reach my right hand inside. And I wanted to go inside and grab the elbow. That was my thought in the match. I wasn't supposed to do that. I did it. He has a lefty high crotch. He scores, and that's pretty much the match. And he goes to the finals, and I wrestle back through and end up taking 4th. Next year, I take 4th again at the World Team Trials, and ranked in the world at that point. I've been number 9 in the world. That's the highest I'd ever been. I was ranked number 2 on the ladder in the US for a couple years, and then wrestled those 9 years, never made a team. I was on multiple World Cup teams. I traveled all around the world. I've been to Ukraine and Russia and Poland and Azerbaijan and Iran and Cuba and France, all over. So I got a chance to do that and train with the best guys in our country. And I was JB's training partner one year for the World Championships. Got hurt right before we were supposed to leave, and he ended up bringing somebody else. So I got done with that, and I coached Division I for 5 years. I was at the Air Force Academy, and then I was at the University of Pennsylvania as well. That's when I came back in 2020 and started Gold Rush, and the rest is history. Now I get to coach wrestlers and travel all around the country with them and help them achieve their goals and dreams. Mm-hmm. And then on the UFC and the MMA side, I get a chance to work with a lot of different fighters. I have a few that I work with closely, which has been really rewarding for me, just because it's something that I said I wanted to do 10 years ago. And it's been really cool to see this take place, and the doors that have opened for it. It's opened up a lot of other doors for me as well.
Now, so you went from Air Force to Penn, or you went from Penn to Air Force?
Air Force to Penn.
Okay. Now, what caused you to leave Division I wrestling? Was it your choice, or was it somebody else's choice?
It was my choice.
Okay.
It's just, I knew that's not what I wanted to do.
Okay.
There's a couple of reasons. One, the most important one was I always wanted to come back to Vegas. I love Las Vegas. I'm from here. I missed my family. My parents were getting older. It was just time, right? Yeah. I had been away for 15 years. I'd taken care of my dreams. Now it's kind of time to come back and finish this other dream that I had of starting Gold Rush and establishing a life somewhere and putting some roots down. And my parents, I hope they have a long time to live. You never know, but I get to be here for the end of their, the last years of their lives, however long that ends up being. Right. 2, on the coaching side, I didn't want to build someone else's brand. I wanted to build my own brand. I wanted to make my own name. And in college wrestling, there's a lot of red tape and things you got to deal with. And you still got to do a lot of things. I mean, being a business owner is a whole other realm. There's a lot of things I learned in college coaching that prepared me for this, because college coaching is 95% back work, paperwork, administrative meetings, 5% is coaching. And the last thing is just the recruiting. I absolutely was not a fan of starting my day at 6 a.m, because you wrestle in college, but you never think about it like this. You go to your lift in the morning, you go to classes, go eat, go to practice, and that's pretty much it for you, right? Yeah. Like, as a college coach, you have that. Some coaches have to be there in the morning. That was our standard. We had someone had to be there in the morning. Usually get done 7 a.m, 7:30. Then you go do some office work. You usually have some kind of meeting in the morning, 1 to 2 meetings in the morning. Then you go for lunch, and you come back. You're going to finish up a little bit of administrative work, whatever you have on your task list for the day. You may have a one-on-one meeting. You may need to meet with an athlete, whatever it might be. And you have practice at 2:15, 3 o'clock, whatever. You get through practice. Sometimes athletes need to stay after. They want to talk to you. They want to work on technique. They got to weight manage, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. Then you go home. It's 5:30 that time, 6 o'clock. You want to eat dinner. You want to whatever. But then you got to start making recruiting calls. And you're making recruiting calls. You're contacting 30, 40 athletes a week, depending on what your load is. Right. So by the time you get out of the day, it's 8:30, 9 o'clock. you know? So it's just not something that I really wanted to do and had a passion for.
Gotcha.
I love coaching, but the
It
college world wasn't for me.
It just wasn't, it was too much. It was too
Yeah.
much to the job. Have you seen like some of the, because I'm sure I knowing you as a person, I know that you probably had nothing to do with it, and you don't have to disparage it if it's another team that you've seen. But I've heard stories and seen like situations with recruiting that are kind of, let's just say, frowned upon. Have you seen some of that stuff? I don't want to give like too much example, but
Yep. It's so the recruiting world, there's a lot of what you would call there's black and white things, and there's a lot of gray area and a lot of loopholes.
Yeah.
And depends how you want to be with it.
Yeah.
Do you want to be the guy that takes advantage of the loopholes? And people do.
Yeah.
People do. And there's some people that try to play it straight by the books.
Right.
It's really difficult to play everything exactly by the books.
Yeah.
I think everybody in some manner or another does try to find loopholes or ways around, or if it's not the coach doing it, it's the athletic director.
Right.
You know, that's kind of part of it. This NIL deal right now and the transfer portal has made wrestling an absolute, the wild, wild west.
Is it good or bad? Is it bad now? Could be good later, but it's just still Wild West, or?
It's pay to play right now in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think it's benefited some schools. It's hurt others. I'm old school and I like the way it used to be, but there is an evolution. There is it's progressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kids are getting paid now. They're getting paid for their likeness. I understand it. It's not my favorite thing, but as I try to dive more into some of those things, i.e. transfer portal, i.e. NIL, yes, it does make a lot of sense. But I mean, think about this. You have college kids that are making more money than their support staff, right? You have college kids that are making more money than their athletic trainers, more money than probably some of their coaches.
Yeah.
It's a wild game. So it's changed the game for good or for bad. I don't know. I'd have to dive in more, but I think you're starting to see, at least for me being a wrestling guy, you're starting to see wrestling grow and grow and grow.
Yeah.
Right? It is getting bigger. There is more money in wrestling than there ever has been. I mean, private clubs like what we have right now with Gold Rush. I mean, you have multiple of these around the country, but it seems like every week someone's popping up a new club in a different state, you know, different city that's good. Not just running a mom and dad, or excuse me, no offense to dads, but like in the past, there was a bunch of dads who got together and were running wrestling practices.
It's like a soccer team. They like
figure it out.
Maybe never did it or what. Yeah.
And they're doing their best, right? And that's no knock. But now you have coaches, professional coaches who are professional athletes going into this world, and the club game and that world blown up.
Yeah.
Right.
What the NIL deal is weird because on the surface, I agree with it. Like I think, I think it's, especially with the bigger sports, like, like the footballs and the basketballs and the baseballs and stuff like that, mostly football, with the NCAA game, like, yeah, you can't make a game, put people in it and then not pay them. Like that just, and the NCAA for the longest time, and the NCAA still doesn't cash any checks. So it's not like the NCAA is paying. It's all these third-party companies that, want to use these sponsors. So on that, I get it. But when you see like, these gymnasts that are basically porn stars, and then people like they're surprised when 20,000 people and like people are trying to, I mean, I'm not saying that anybody should attack them, but when they have like a certain crowd that's like seen them naked, like you're going to get what you put out there. Right. And like, so that's one of the things. It's like, it's almost a consequence of freedom. Like I think it is good. I think there should be like social media and NIL, like there was no money in wrestling before that. Like my buddy, a guy I went on a mission trip with, like he won the Olympics, and we were like, oh, what, John, what happened when you won the Olympics? He's like, I got a pat on the back. Like I had to pay for, he like basically had to pay for his own trip, which is just crazy to think. But now with social media, like, guys that maybe aren't on the world team can still get paid, can still have like a sponsorship deal or whatever. Like, I think it's a better world for people that are willing to do the right thing with it. But you've got people, like I said, like gymnasts or, other people that want to do the OnlyFans or that want to, promote certain brands that are a little bit more detestable than others. like that's not good either. And then you got kids that are like, no, I'm gonna, play the game. Like, who's gonna offer me the most money? Like, which NIL deal? And it's like, hey, go like where you should go. Like, don't go, don't necessarily make money the decision maker always. I don't know.
So I like two things you said about that. On the back, remember the money is the decision maker. In case I forget, sometimes I start talking and forget. But the Olympian thing, it's wild, dude. When I came out of college and I went to the Olympic Training Center, essentially I became a professional athlete.
Yeah.
How much money I made? Zero.
Zero.
$0. That was my offer to come train at the just come train at the Olympic Training Center. You get your food and meals paid, or food and boarding, which is great. You get your that's good.
Yeah.
But I was making $0.
How did you provide for yourself?
So there was a club that reached out to me up there in Colorado, and they paid me like $400 a month, but really ended up, I was a 1099. On top of that, I had to drive up to Denver every week. So it really ended up becoming like
$200,
maybe $200,
oh,
$200 a month. So I was driving 2 hours every Tuesday night to run a practice, and to make pennies on the dollar. Now thinking about it, I should have negotiated more up and been like, hey, I need more. But at the time, I was just kind of naive. I was like, hey, I just won a national title. Thing that did help me, I did some camps that summer and made some money. When you're in the national finals, you get a national title, you can usually cash in on those kind of things.
Right. People will pay for your trip and they'll pay to do your camp and everything.
They pay, so I had some money stacked away. And then a couple months later, there was a guy out there who was in venture capital.
Okay.
Who our coaches at the training center set up a meeting with him and I, and I'll never forget, he came in. It's the first time I thought like, wow, I got a fan. He like came in, he's like, dude, is that Chase Pami? Like national finalist? Like, it was kind of like, that's the first, like one of the first times I'd really like someone that I didn't really know. Right. And so he came in.
Was it the Oak Grove guy?
Nope. It's a guy named Buck Wessel.
Okay.
He did a bunch of venture capital out there.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so he ended up paying me a certain amount every month. So I was making about roughly like, give or take $700-800 a month, and
gotcha.
Granted, I had food and boarding and all that taken care of.
Right.
But it honestly, man, not till the very end of my career, the last 4 years when I moved to Pennsylvania and I was training at the RTC there, was I have a decent salary. I had ability to make more. I had bonuses. I had 401k. I had dental and health. So I was well taken care of better taken care of at the end of my career. But that game's changed. It's definitely changed, even for international athletes. Like the ability to make more money is there. To the last part, talking about money, right? Like this is something I always talk about with recruits when they were coming to Penn, or people when they come to Gold Rush, because sometimes you get people that want to switch over from this club, or sometimes they want to leave your club and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
The important thing is, and I try to tell the kids, especially right now, we got a lot of kids looking at colleges. I think we've got 8 or 9 kids looking at colleges. Do the first thing you go to college is, do not ask how much I'm going to get for a scholarship. That's not your first question.
Yeah.
And I tell the parents that don't bring that up. Let them bring that up to you. You focus on the culture. You focus on the values of the program. You focus on the accountability that the athletes have in the program. You focus on where the program's going. You focus on how the coach is interacting with the athletes. You focus on all these. These are the important things. These are teaching them that this is the cake.
Yeah.
And the money is the icing.
Right.
Money, if that's all it's about for you as an athlete, and that's all it's about for you as a employee, if that's all it's about, you're going to miss the ability to even make more money, or the ability to develop and grow in other ways.
Right.
And so that's my philosophy running a club. Like, people probably think I make a ton. Dude, running a business and you have 13 employees and all this overhead, it's not as much as
right.
people think. But for me, money's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the whole thing.
Sure.
And we'll grow and raises and all that, all that comes in times, but you can't that can't be the only thing. Like I have to have other things that drive me and drive my staff. I know you're kind of younger on the staff, but some of the guys that have been there for 2, 3, 4 years now, like we have to talk about what are the things that drive you in this, because you know, those, if you're going to be in this for the long term, there's got to be things that drive you beyond just beyond finances.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think that's huge to tell kids, because I do think that is one downside to the NIL stuff and some of the other things. Probably not so much in wrestling. I think wrestling is small enough to maintain its purity in this, as sad as that is. Hopefully that's not always the case. I would love to see wrestling continue to double and triple in fandom. Because I've never seen anybody go to a wrestling duel and not enjoy it and not want to come back. It's just, how do we get them there? You know, but I think that is one downside, is that people are looking at dollar signs. And so what would you say to parents? Because that is, a lot of that is just values instilled in the home, you know, because it's a lot easier to take a deal that says, you know, that has an extra zero on it, but people don't always understand, like, that extra zero might come with a lot more than you're willing to pay or be paid for, you know, like you might be selling your soul for that extra zero almost. Like, obviously, you know, not physically, but.
you're exactly right. And that just comes with parent education. Know your value. That is important. You got to know your value. And now the game, though, the way it is, like, you have to have an understanding of business,
Right.
somewhat working knowledge of values. How valuable is somebody? What is their true value? What do you bring to the program? A lot of people think, oh, just because I'm the number 5 ranked kid in the country, I should get this, this, and this. Yeah, you probably should, you think, but what other values do you have? And so I try to teach our kids and families that, one, know your value, but know your value beyond the dollar worth.
Yeah.
And then you can explain why you believe that value is what it is, right? I'm worth, you know, let's just say it's $100,000, you know, for 5 years. That's how much it costs to go to this school. That's a pretty low number, but hey, I believe I'm worth X, Y, and Z for these amount of years. You know, I think, just like I said earlier, for parents, I tell them, go in to this not just thinking about the dollar signs. Go into this, ask the questions of the coaches, observe when you go on recruiting trips, observe. Just had a couple kids go to a D1 college last week, and I told the parents, observe their culture, observe how their coaches interact with their athletes, know your son and how they respond, and try to picture your son in that environment. Are they going to respond well? Look at the city. You go to the city, this is where they're going to live for the next 5 years. What kind of things do you see? You know, think about, that's where your kid's going to live. Look at the values of the program and the mission. Are those things being talked about and discussed? I know for us at Gold Rush, every practice right now is across the board, should be happening, right? Is take that 5 to 10 minutes after practice to talk about life things, to talk about our values, to talk about our mission, just to plant those seeds consistently, time after time after time after time after time. So those kids understand that values come with it.
Yeah.
So our coaches being intentional to talk about those things. And for parents, have a working knowledge of money, right? Again, like you said, just because there's another zero on that, you better understand what that zero entails.
Right.
There's always an angle.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not always, but everyone has an angle at what they're doing.
They want something out of it.
They want something.
Yeah.
That's natural human nature.
Right.
So, hey, you might need to take a little less at another college who has a better vision and they're going to cultivate what's inside of your child better than another college might. And you might need to take a little less to do it. But if you're thinking about the long game and who your child is going to become 5 years, because this is where they're going to get molded for the next 5 years.
Right.
If you want money to mold them, okay. But if you want to put them in a program where they're going to develop these different skills and things like that for their future, for what's ahead, that's what you got to look at.
Yeah. I think it's so important too, with all of that, you know, just understanding that, like, just how much culture drives. Like, what would you say to somebody that maybe, you know, it's their dream school and it's the dream culture, and it's, you know, for a fact, it's going to develop their kids more than any other place, but they're not offering any money. And another place that maybe, you know, won't do those things. Maybe they have a bad reputation, but they're offering a full scholarship. How would you go about that situation? would that be a financial situation to talk through with the parents then?
Yeah, that would be something, the school that would have everything that you wanted in terms of culture and all those things, and maybe the money isn't there. Okay. If this is where you want to be, are those coaches willing to have the conversation of what it would look like to earn money?
Mm-hmm.
Starting off, most schools, let's just start base level. Most schools have some kind of internship. Most schools have some kind of yearly work program, summer work program that they can make an extra couple $1,000s a year. So let's just start there, right? Yeah. Are there any financial scholarships that are academic scholarships that are being offered? Are there any race-based or culture-based,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know some programs like schools, you have Indian in you, Native American, you get money. You have, especially with the world we're living in right now, and acceptance of culture and things like that. There's
diversity, and
right? So there's some of that, but I think kind of the big piece that would be discussing with the coaches, is there a way that almost like a coach who's hired who has a bonuses built into them? Okay, hey, you make the team, you get 30% scholarship. Mm-hmm. You be an All-American the next year, you get full ride. Something like that, where you see if coaches are willing to do that and agree upon that.
Right.
Get it in writing.
Right.
And if they're not willing to do it, then hey, then that program's not going to fit. And the other program who's going to offer you the money, you may need to go keep looking around.
Now, does that happen where you can actually like negotiate with the coach, say, hey, listen, if I make the starting lineup, I get X amount. If I am a qualifier, I get X more amount. If I'm a All-American or national champ, I get this much. Like, is that something that actually does happen with recruiting with some of the high level guys?
I don't know, because I haven't been in the world for a little bit. And I was also part of a program at Penn who is financial need based. So we didn't have scholarships. It was based on, you come from a family, this is what your mom and dad make, this is some of this properties, yada, yada, yada. You take all this, you put it into a financial, you do calculator. A financial called financial calculator, spits back a number of what they're going to pay every year. So
it's basically like financial aid, how they do all that, right? Like they determine you're in this tax bracket, you have this much net worth, like this is what we're going to offer you, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our approach was a little bit different. We had to kind of come at it from a business approach, right? Okay. So you're gonna get 10,000 in debt each year, but this is what you can make. Especially Penn, who's a very, one of the top ranked universities, Ivies. You're talking business, yeah. So hey, you're gonna make an extra 4,000 a year doing this, and this.
Right.
When you graduate, you're in business. Here's your return on investment. In 3 years, you're gonna have paid off 85% of your loan. In 4 years, you're going to have everything paid off. And in year 5, you're going to be netting, $100,000 every year, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So that was our model. On the scholarship side, I don't know if it's happening, but if it's not, like, it should.
It should, right?
People should be having those conversations with coaches. And I know coaches probably won't like that, because I don't know if it's something that's happened a lot.
Yeah.
Most coaches are like, okay, well, if they're going to negotiate this, and this, then why are we going to spend our time here? So right. I think if parents aren't doing, especially more the mid-level, maybe the number 20 ranked kids, the kids that are right outside of the rankings who are getting scholarship offers, but smaller amounts.
Right.
Are you negotiating those things? Are you bringing a lawyer to the table? Most people don't think about that. Like, hey, you get a contract from university, like, get it in writing.
Yeah.
There's one thing I've learned with anything I do as a business owner now, and I still don't think I'm as good at it as I want to be, because it is time consuming, but I try to put everything in writing, at least for my staff members.
Yeah.
So they can see and I can see, and there's an agreement there. But writing's king. When it's in writing and it's notarized, it's signed, it has everything.
I feel like this would catch coaches so off guard. Like if a high school kid came in, I don't know what the rules are now with NIL with agents. Do you know what the rules are? That's basically what an agent does.
I'm not. See, I haven't been in it a lot to know what that's looking like now.
I would almost feel like college wrestling coaches have no idea how that works.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, if it happened once or twice, guys would probably be like, oh, screw this kid, we're not working out with him. But if it's like everyone almost unionized, I don't know. That's kind of what the UFC is going through right now. Is like, no, this is your contract, and now guys are like, no, I'm the one fighting. I don't know. It's a weird world.
Yeah.
When you get lawyers involved, but I do think because a business is never going to, like, you as a business owner, you're not gonna get 10 minutes. Okay, cool. You as a business owner, you're never going to give like your maximum amount to a guy. Like, the most we could possibly pay you is X amount. And that's what we're gonna, it's like, no, you're gonna lowball.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to negotiate more and say, hey, listen, this is what I think I'm worth. Because if they don't, then that's good on you, right? You save some money. And I don't think anybody's wrong for that, but they're not wrong for negotiating more either, you know? And you working with fighters, you probably see this a lot now, especially with some of the other organizations that are really kind of testing the UFC.
Yeah.
Like what is your take on this?
I don't have a heavy take because I'm on the outside a little bit. I'm
Okay.
still on the outside looking in terms of, I just coach these guys, or girls, and I get my percentage, and that's that. So I've only been in the game, really. I've cornered 3 fights.
Okay.
I've been in the game a year and a half now. So I'm still very new to all of it. I'm still learning a lot of it. I do understand a lot more about what's going on, and it hasn't impacted me too much because I have something else that's my main thing. Like, like Gold Rush and the properties that I have, like, those are things that, like, not that I can do fighting for fun. I still got to make money out of it. Because these are things that are building.
Right.
But with the fighters right now, I'm just trying to learn everything I can about the game. I'm not necessarily trying to be pushing back too much.
Right.
Because I'm not there yet to
You're
know,
not in that
to know
space.
enough about everything.
Yeah.
However, the more I do learn about it, I understand being a business owner. I understand the UFC side. I mean, it is ruthless. Like, I just think back to that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson situation a couple months ago when his opponent didn't make weight. Wonderboy made weight, but he didn't want to fight him because he had fought somebody before who didn't make weight, and they beat him, and it messed with his trajectory back to the top.
Yeah.
Didn't get paid, at least from what we were told, didn't get his purse.
Right.
Which I thought, hey, that's kind of messed up.
Right.
One guy does something right, the other guy doesn't, but that was the contract. That was the agreement. UFC runs like a business. They run things really tight, right? And they're successful.
Yeah.
What the years have to come, I think it's going to be interesting. I think that world probably gets shaken up in some ways. I mean, you've got PFL, and they just bought out Bellator. And granted, that's a really small thing. They're not near the size and the net worth, but still, like, there's something there.
There's a lot there. Yeah.
Got what Francis just did, and you've got fighters who are looking to get into take boxing fights. They're going to make much, much more money, and their value is going to be.
Well, what about the WWE too? Because the UFC just partnered with the WWE, and I think a lot more guys are going to go that direction, especially after fighting, or maybe kind of at the tail end of their career.
But I think WWE. So there was a buddy of mine. I'm bummed that I never asked more questions. Buddy of mine was cruiserweight champion in WWE.
Okay.
Years ago. We just had a girl right now who is from Nevada, very successful college wrestler, and decided to go the WWE route. So she's in training right now. And I didn't ask her what her contract and offer was, but I think it was pretty
substantial,
attractive for a girl right out of college. Right. So I don't know though how those dynamics, I just don't know what WWE wrestlers make. The money's there. I think it takes time, just like anything else. I think the UFC, it all takes time. You're starting at the bottom, you're working your way up. But yes, on my end, I would love to see some of those lower end fighters that are not lower end, but I don't mean it that way, but those that are coming up, especially from the bottom, like some of those guys, you make 5 and 5, like 10 and 10.
Yeah.
Like, training camp, let's say 10-week training camp, you have to pay your coaches. You have 2 to 3 coaches. You got to pay your gym fees.
You might want to take time off work.
Yeah. Might have to take time off work. Exactly. You got to pay your managers, all these kind of things that get into play. So it's, like anything, I believe change is gonna happen. How it happens, what the trajectory moving forward looks like.
Yeah,
I don't really know. The UFC has a model, and maybe that's the model for some people, but PFL is gonna, they're gonna have something different, and maybe that's a model for other. It's all about fit at the end of the day.
I think and I know you got to get going, but I think it's good to have options, because you get a guy that's maybe 5-0, right? And he's done the LFA, he's done the Tough Enough, like whatever his road was to get in that 5-0. And now it's time to start negotiating. Do I want to go on the Ultimate Fighter? Do I want to go on the Contender? Do I want to go UFC? Do I want to go PFL? And it's like, do I want to go one? Like, what is it? UFC might say, hey, we're going to pay you 12-12. And you're going to have to fight 4 fights and win them before you ever get ranked. And PFL's like, we're going to pay you this much. And if you win 4 fights, you'll be the champion. You'll be a millionaire. Like, that's a huge, like, obviously, and you're going to have probably less competition. Like, so I think there's better options where the guys that are middle of the rung can go other places and be very successful. And then maybe they can renegotiate after their year's up, or after, they've got X amount of fights. I mean, my buddy Chris Curtis, he didn't win the PFL, but now he's ranked in the UFC, and he just kept going.
Yeah.
He just kept figuring things out. And I think that's a good route for a lot of guys. I think wherever you can go, that's going to treat you right. It's going to pay you well. And it's going to be reflective of your skill set, I think is smart.
Yeah. It's like you're saying, Michael Chandler was a good friend of mine. We graduated the same year, built his name in Bellator and made a crud ton of money.
Yeah.
And then was a name coming to the UFC. And I'm not sure what he's made since then. I mean, sure, he's still made really good money. I mean, he's been in big fights. I think that route is very difficult.
Right.
It's hard. I think any route though is going to be difficult to the UFC. If you're going to go up the ladder and start in the bottom and be I don't want to say like a corporate guy, but that's kind of how corporate is sometimes. Right. It's like jumping, climbing the ladder each step, or you're going to do it a different route. But it kind of depends what you want. And do you want to be in the UFC where it is extremely, extremely competitive? You have the highest level guys in there. There's no doubt about that right now. I think as I ask people and talk more, because I try to understand, like the very top of PFL, Bellator would be very competitive, but the drop off as you go down, there's a drop off.
Yeah.
But that changes in time. Right. So I think, again, to what you're saying, I think options in the marketplace are really important. Me as a business owner, I love it and I hate it. Right. I have a couple other clubs who are competition in Vegas.
Yeah. You don't want that.
Guess what? When a kid goes there, they leave my club, vice versa. When a kid leaves their club, or a customer went to them, or a customer went to whatever, it's competition.
Right.
But it's also great. I remember Coach Casey, who coaches at 10th Planet. He told me, jiu-jitsu gym open 5 minutes down the road. So I was like, aren't you mad about that? He's like, no. When there's jiu-jitsu, there's so many people in this. There's not enough jiu-jitsu gyms for people to go to.
Yeah.
So everything's got to have its own options. So I from that side, as a business owner, people having options is a good thing.
Right.
Right. Because I offer a certain service in a way that it's done and how things go. And hey, you know what? Like, not everyone's going to like that.
Right.
They are going to want something a little bit different, a little different flair, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Hey, that's, I want to say that's all right. My competitive side is like, no, it's not all right. But then my been around the world a couple times, business side, marketplace. Okay.
Yeah. At the end of the day, and I think us as wrestlers, like, people are wrestling, and that's the important thing. And whether they're doing it here, or whether they're doing it there's places that you can get better coaching. But I think our main objective is, obviously we do the best service to who we've got, but we want to see the sport grow. Like, we want wrestling on ESPN. Like, we want to push, some of these other sports off. Like, that's where I think our competition should be, is wrestling going to be bigger than boxing? Is wrestling going to be bigger than baseball and football? Like, obviously we're a long way away from that, but trying to make that the competition, not so much like other coaches and other teams outside of, when we're actually competing against them. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Some ways.
You're right on. So it's a mixture of both.
Yeah.
So going to compete with other teams and coaches, but then, we want to compete for our place in that world, ESPN or world. Even UFC. I know there's talks about there being college dual meets this year at the UFC Apex. I think there's 1 or 2 that are signed and good to go. Like, that's very good.
It's awesome
for wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. And even having that route as wrestlers, like maybe doing like a UFC, development league or something like that later on down the road. And, instead of guys going straight to the Olympic Training Center, maybe they go to the UFC, performance center, and that's where they get, you know, their development, or Bellator or PFL or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's the deals they sign.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly. That's great. I like that idea. This is a great, dude. Great. I could run on this. I could do this for another 2 hours.
I know I got to let you go.
I could keep on to all the ideas you're coming up with. So I love the development piece, but yeah, dude, thanks for having me on. We'll have to do this again. This was actually fun. I had a busy morning, but
No worries.
and I was starting to get sick. I'm like, I go in. I'm like, but I'm glad this was really good.
Thank you, Chase.
So.
I appreciate it. Chase, Pami. Thank you, brother.
Hell yeah.